I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Justin Pritchard. For those of you who are new to Bridgeway or just visiting, I'm the pastor to young adults here at Bridgeway. We want to welcome you to our facility tonight, and we are doing something a little bit different. So for those of you who are normally with us on Tuesday, bear with us. For those of you who aren't normally with us on Tuesday, you don't know a thing. It's okay. It doesn't look any different to me. We'll be all right. So, what we're going to be doing tonight is we are hosting a live debate over the resurrection of Christ between two professors from Sac State. Russell DiSilvestro will be arguing the Christian argument that Jesus did indeed rise from the dead. He is an assistant professor, philosophy department at Sacramento State. He's been there 4 years. And Professor Matt McCormick will be arguing the atheist side that Christ did not, in fact, rise from the dead. And there's also a professor, an associate professor at Sacramento State in the philosophy department, has been there since the 90s. So some of you were not born yet. I was. So what we're really hoping to get out tonight is just a wonderful discussion. We're really thankful that you guys joined us tonight. So tonight's moderator will be Ben Levin, who's sitting down in the front row. He will be the keeper of the clock. The way this will work, each gentleman will be giving a 20-minute opening main argument, a 10-minute follow-on, and a 5-minute final statement, at which time, or during that time, between the 20-minute and 10-minute segments, you'll get an opportunity to write down questions. There are pieces of paper lurking about. Pens are in the seats in front of you. As the 10-minute segments close, so for that 20-minute bulk time, we'll be collecting all the questions from everybody. They'll be screened, and then we'll get a chance to discuss with the professors some follow-on questions. So, with that, I'm actually just going to turn the floor over to these fine gentlemen. So.
Good evening. I want to start by thanking Bridgeway Christian Church for hosting this debate, for Professor McCormick for agreeing to debate me, and for you for coming out to this evening's debate. Professor McCormick and I have known each other for 4 years, and I really appreciate him as a philosopher and as a colleague. He's a good example of someone who is interested in hearing all sides of an issue, not just the side he currently agrees with. For example, a few years ago, we began talking with each other about the resurrection. A few semesters ago, he invited me to present some of my material tonight to his philosophy of religion class. And a few months ago, he even shared with me an important recent essay that he had read, which defends the resurrection. In some ways, Professor McCormick reminds me of one of my favorite authors named C.S. Lewis, who himself was skeptical about Christianity for a long time. It's no accident that two of Lewis's most enduring fictional characters, the dwarf named Trumpkin in Prince Caspian, and the Scotsman named McPhee in That Hideous Strength, were straightforward skeptics whose opinions you respect even when you strongly disagree with them. But while these characters were fictional, Professor McCormick is the real thing. And while we're debating with each other tonight, we are dining with each other tomorrow night, and I believe that's exactly the way it should be. All the same, I've not come here to praise Professor McCormick, but to debate him on the resurrection of Jesus. So the basic argument I'm going to be defending tonight is found in the work of many Christian philosophers down through the ages, and it's represented in a somewhat more technical form by Richard Swinburne, who's a professor of philosophy at Oxford University. However, the version of the argument that I will be presenting tonight comes directly from the work of Christian philosopher William Lane Craig, who is a research professor of philosophy at Talbot School of Theology. So here's the main argument. 4 facts need to be explained by any adequate historical hypothesis about the resurrection, and the best explanation of these facts is that God raised Jesus from the dead. Now, before I jump into explaining the 4 facts, I need to say just a bit about what I mean by the best explanation. There's a kind of argument that we use in many areas of ordinary life, as well as in certain specialized activities, like jury deliberation or the historical sciences. It's called inference to the best explanation, and it works roughly like this. When you're explaining a body of data First, you put together a pool of live options. Then, you pick from the pool, on the basis of certain tests, the explanation which, if true, would best explain the data. For example, I was recently on a jury for a case involving multiple armed robberies. Our body of data consisted of things like this: eyewitness testimony by the victims of the different robberies, testimony by the friends and family of the defendant regarding the defendant's whereabouts during the time when one of the robberies took place, cell phone records from stolen cell phones, ATM records from stolen ATM cards, photographs taken by security cameras of various kinds, and I could go on. But based on this data, we on the jury put together some live options for what happened. Of course, in our American legal system, the defendant is always innocent until proven guilty. But still, given the data, it's important to think about how the defendant could be innocent, given all the data presented by the prosecution. Then, the jury tries to hash out which option would best explain this data. Now, I'm a philosopher, not a New Testament scholar. But the four facts I want to discuss tonight are facts that a majority of New Testament scholars today would agree with. So let me begin with fact number one. After his crucifixion, Jesus was buried by Joseph of Arimathea in a tomb. Scholars who research the earliest Christian writings have established this fact on the basis of several strands of evidence. For one thing, Jesus' burial is mentioned in the very old information handed on by Paul in his first letter to the Corinthians. It's likely that Paul received this information mentioning Jesus' burial no later than his own visit to Jerusalem, if not earlier, in Damascus. So the information goes back to within the first 5 years or so after Jesus' death. In short, we have some evidence for Jesus' burial that is so very early that it's hard to explain it away as a legend. However, Paul's not our only source of information here. You see, Jesus' burial is also part of very old source material used by Mark, when Mark wrote his gospel. Even if we leave aside Matthew, Luke, and John, when you combine Mark's testimony with Paul's, you have two early independent sources mentioning the burial of Jesus. Finally, as a member of the Jewish court that condemned Jesus, Joseph of Arimathea is not likely to be a Christian invention. Think about this for just a moment. The Jewish court at that time, called the Sanhedrin, had in Christian eyes set up a legalized murder of Jesus. Understandably then, the prevailing attitude in the early church toward the Sanhedrin was one of hostility. Why would you mention a member of the Sanhedrin as giving Jesus an honorable burial unless he really did give Jesus an honorable burial? Now, this first fact about Jesus' burial is highly significant because it means that the location of Jesus' tomb was known. In that case, the disciples could not have proclaimed his resurrection in Jerusalem if the tomb had not been empty, which leads us to our second fact. On the Sunday following the crucifixion, Jesus' tomb was found empty by a group of his women followers. Once again, scholars who research the earliest Christian writings have established this fact on the basis of several strands of evidence. For one thing, the old information transmitted by Paul in 1 Corinthians implies the fact of the empty tomb. The relevant part of the information is a phrase that Paul says, Jesus was raised on the third day. Maybe I should read you that passage from 1 Corinthians that includes the material. Paul says, "What I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins, according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day, according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Peter, and then to the 12.